While I worked my way to the top, my entitled brother stumbled from failure to failure. The higher I rose, the more I was expected to carry his burdens. It all came crashing down at his 35th birthday party, where decades of resentment, favoritism, and silent sacrifices exploded into one unforgettable confrontation. If you've ever been the overlooked one, you need to hear how this ends. Part 1. I'm only 32. Still young enough to believe that life can be steered by logic and effort. Still naive enough to be blindsided by the people I called family. What happened last month at my brother Adrian's birthday was not just a family gathering. It was the storm I'd been dodging for years. The confrontation I didn't see coming. And it all unfolded inside the walls of the penthouse I bought with years of sweat and sacrifice. The one symbol of independence I had clung to as my identity. Before I share how it all started, the choices I made, the truths I uncovered, I want to know where you're watching from. Please, follow and leave a comment with your city, your stories, your voices. They matter. And if you've also been the overlooked one, maybe my story will feel familiar. When I walked into my parents' house, clutching an expensive leather-bound rare book I had ordered months ago, a gift Adrian would forget by next week, the air hit me like a cold front. A strange silence, broken only by the clink of glasses and awkward greetings. Faces tilted toward me with that all-too-familiar blend of polite curiosity, poorly hidden judgment, and subtle disapproval. I knew that expression. I'd seen it since childhood. Every time I succeeded, every time I rose, every time I quietly broke the mold they tried to fit me in. It was the look people give when they expect you to apologize for being too much. Adrian, at 35, still somehow managed to be the center of our universe, the golden child who never quite launched. My brother was a walking paradox, jobless, directionless, yet adored like he carried the cure to every family wound. His dreams changed with the seasons, but my parents, Lorraine and Edward, always believed he was destined for something extraordinary. Meanwhile, I was just Evelyn. Growing up in our modest neighborhood in Portland, the pattern was established early, almost like a ritual. Adrian was the miracle firstborn, the answer to my parents' prayers. 3 years later, I came along, a girl they hadn't quite planned for and never fully understood. Our house was small, the kind with creaky floorboards and a backyard barely wide enough to toss a football. But the real imbalance wasn't in square footage. It was in attention, praise, care, emotion. When Adrian shattered the neighbor's window playing baseball inside the house, despite being warned, my father chuckled and said, "Boys will be boys." But when I spilled juice on a carpet, the disappointment in my mother's eyes felt like a death sentence. When Adrian brought home D's on his report card, Lorraine would sigh and say, "School doesn't work for minds like his. He's too creative." Meanwhile, I brought home straight A's from 4th grade onward. My reward? A distracted nod, maybe a muttered "good job," before she turned to help Adrian with whatever emergency he'd fabricated that day. I found computers that same year, 4th grade. The glowing screen became my escape, my sanctuary. I stayed after school to learn programming on old clunky machines while the other kids chased each other on the playground. There was something about the logic of it all, the problem solving, the clarity. It made sense in a world that didn't. In high school, I joined the robotics club. My team won regionals. We got a trophy and everything. My parents weren't there to see it. Adrian had a football game. He didn't play. He never did. But their priorities were always clear. I came home that night, beaming, clutching a piece of proof that I was doing something right. My father glanced at the trophy, nodded, and said, "Just don't get too deep into that tech stuff. Boys don't like girls who are smarter than them." It wasn't just a comment. It was the family's unofficial motto. When college applications rolled around, I applied to 12 schools, got scholarships to 8. I chose a state university with one of the best computer science departments in the region. My parents didn't contribute a dime. My mother's excuse? College is expensive, Evelyn. We need to save for Adrian's future. Adrian's future. That imaginary place where he would finally shine. That golden promise we were all apparently required to keep believing in. I took on 3 jobs. Mornings at a coffee shop, weekends in retail, late-night data entry shifts. I barely slept, but I pushed through. Adrian? He started at a private college on my parents' dime, dropped out within months because the professors didn't get him. They paid for him to try again and again. He flunked out of 3 schools in 5 years. When I graduated with honors, computer science major, mathematics, and business minors, my parents came to the ceremony, but they left early. Adrian had called. Something about a situation with his landlord. They didn't even stay long enough for photos. My first job was at a startup, entry level. I could barely make rent in my shoebox apartment, but I worked 60-hour weeks, learned every coding language I could, contributed to open source projects, and built my name in a male-dominated industry. Those were hard years, lonely years, but they were mine. Adrian, on the other hand, floated from job to job. He worked in retail until the manager disrespected his vision, waited tables until the vibe wasn't right, took on a desk job that suffocated his creative spirit. Each time, our parents responded with endless compassion. "He just hasn't found his calling. Dad would say, smiling over his glass of wine. He's too bright for these menial roles, Mom would echo, folding his laundry behind him. By the time I turned 26, I landed a position at Horizon Technologies, one of Seattle's top software companies. The promotion meant a new salary bracket, a better apartment, finally a dent in my student loans. I called my parents, breathless with joy. "That's nice, dear," my mother said. "But did you hear Adrian's thinking of starting his own business? He's got such an entrepreneurial fire." The business was sneaker reselling, funded by yet another loan from them. It lasted 3 months. I stopped expecting applause for my victories. Instead, I poured my energy into building a life that didn't depend on their validation. I made real friends, people who celebrated when I succeeded, who saw me, really saw me. I joined hiking groups, a book club. I even started mentoring girls in STEM programs. Rebecca became my closest friend. We met at a Women in Tech conference. She came from a family that believed in her, encouraged her, invested in her. When I told her about mine, she looked horrified. "That's not normal, Evelyn," she said gently. "You know that, right? Parents are supposed to be proud when their kids thrive." I knew. Deep down, I always knew. But when you've grown up in the shadows, sunlight can feel blinding. So I kept my distance. I still showed up for holidays, for birthdays, like Adrian's last month, but with expectations low and emotional armor high. I should have trusted my gut when I saw their faces that day. I should have known something bigger was coming, but I didn't. Not until it was too late. 2. By the time I turned 30, I had established a life that finally felt like it belonged to me. Not borrowed, not tolerated, not earned through comparison to someone else. It was mine. At Horizon Technologies, I was moving up steadily, mentoring junior developers, leading complex systems integrations, and contributing to projects that were transforming industries. My hard work was paying off in ways that went beyond salary or status. For the first time in my life, I felt not just accomplished, but grounded, real. Meanwhile, Adrian, 33 years old and still living at home, floated through life like a leaf in the wind. He was between jobs again, between passions, as my mother Lorraine called them, between responsibilities. And yet, nothing about his life ever seemed to raise concern. He remained, as always, the sun around which my parents orbited, and I was just a distant planet, spinning, glowing, but always too far to truly matter. What I didn't know back then was that the higher I climbed, the closer I came to shaking the fragile foundation of my family's delusions. My progress, my hard-earned, entirely self-made success, was about to ignite a firestorm I never expected. At 30, everything changed. Horizon promoted me to senior software architect, a title that came with not just a generous salary boost, but company equity and long-term financial stability. It was the kind of milestone people dreamed of, the kind of moment you wish you could freeze and live in for just a bit longer. With this promotion, I finally had the freedom to pursue the dream I'd nurtured quietly for years, owning a space that was mine, not just any space, a place that reflected everything I had worked for, that represented the life I had built alone. After months of careful market research, consultations with financial advisors, and spreadsheet after spreadsheet of comparisons, I found it, a 2-bedroom penthouse on the 32nd floor of the Cascade building in downtown Seattle. The moment I stepped inside, I knew it was mine. The view alone, glass walls showcasing Elliott Bay, the Space Needle, and, on clear days, the outline of Mount Rainier, felt like a reward the universe had finally decided I deserved. The living space was open and bright, flowing seamlessly into a sleek, marble-draped kitchen that whispered of calm evenings and clinking glasses. The master suite had a walk-in closet and a soaking tub that sat beneath a wall of windows, perfectly positioned to capture the city lights. The second bedroom, I transformed it into a home office, fitted with built-in bookshelves and a standing desk facing the water. It wasn't just real estate, it was validation, a sanctuary, something I could point to and say, this is what perseverance looks like. In a family where my needs were always second, here was something built entirely around me. The building itself felt like a different world, with rooftop gardens, a state-of-the-art gym, concierge service around the clock, and a resident lounge that made work from home feel like luxury. But the best part wasn't the square footage or the amenities. It was the silence, the emotional stillness, the fact that no one could walk into this space and claim a piece of it unless I allowed it. Rebecca was the first person I invited over after moving in. She arrived with a bottle of champagne and a grin that stretched across her face. We toasted on the balcony as the sun melted behind the Olympic mountains. "You earned every inch of this," she said, tapping her glass against mine. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." And for a second, I believed it. But deep down, I wished, foolishly, that my family could feel what she felt, even just a little. So I did something naive. I invited them. A housewarming dinner. I cooked Lorraine's favorite baked salmon recipe, set the table with dinnerware I'd handpicked for the occasion, bought Edward's favorite scotch, stocked the fridge with Adrian's preferred craft beer. I put in the effort not because I thought they deserved it, but because I still craved a flicker of recognition, a trace of pride in their eyes. They arrived 45 minutes late. Lorraine stepped inside, glanced briefly at the table I'd spent hours preparing, then muttered, "This building must have some serious HOA fees. Seems like a lot for one person." Edward headed straight to the windows and let out a low whistle. "Flashy place," he said flatly. "Hope you're not overextending yourself. Markets can turn fast." Adrian wandered through the apartment like a real estate agent appraising a listing he could never afford. He opened cabinets, peeked into closets, and finally muttered, loud enough for me to hear, "Must be nice. Some people just get all the breaks." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and brought dinner to the table. Throughout the meal, Lorraine talked incessantly about Adrian's promising job interview and how the hiring manager would be lucky to have someone with his versatile experience. When I mentioned my recent promotion, Edward gave a distracted nod. "Companies throw around titles nowadays," he said. "Back in my day, you worked decades for something like that." After dinner, as I showed them the sunset from the balcony, Adrian leaned on the railing and asked, "So, what's a place like this cost you? You must be raking it in." Before I could sidestep the question, Lorraine added, "Yes, Evelyn. It does make us wonder if you're being wise. Family should always come before material things, you know." They didn't say it outright, not yet, but I felt it. The implication, the expectation. They left soon after. Lorraine didn't touch the dessert I made. Edward didn't say goodbye. Adrian took 2 beers on his way out. The next morning, Rebecca called. I told her how it went. She was quiet for a moment before saying, "They can't celebrate you, Evelyn, because if they did, they'd have to admit what Adrian's become, and they're not ready to face that." She was right. That Sunday, I visited my parents for dinner. Lorraine brought up casually that Adrian was again between opportunities and added, "It's just hard for him, seeing his little sister in a place like that when he's struggling to keep up with car payments." Edward chimed in. "Family looks out for each other, Evelyn. Remember that." I did remember. Every time I sacrificed, every time I was told to be patient, to be quiet, to wait, I remembered all of it. From there, things only got worse. At Thanksgiving, Aunt Judith asked in front of the entire family, "Wouldn't you be lonely in that big old penthouse? I'm sure Adrian would appreciate having a quiet place to figure things out." At Christmas, Uncle Thomas caught me in the kitchen. "Your brother just needs a break, a real break. A man needs space, you know? You've got that spare room after all." I smiled. I nodded. I changed the subject. But every time the penthouse came up, Adrian grew bolder. Jokes about my shower pressure, comments about testing the balcony view, entitlement disguised as humor. Then came the breaking point. I hosted a small dinner party for colleagues. A quiet, professional evening. Rebecca was there. So were some key people from Horizon. That afternoon, my parents called to ask if they could drop something off. I hesitated, then agreed. Big mistake. They arrived with Adrian. No warning, no apology. Lorraine critiqued the hors d'oeuvres in front of my boss. Adrian helped himself to the wine and said, to Emma from HR, "My sister likes to play hostess now. Guess she forgot where she came from." I didn't make a scene, not in front of my guests, but once they left, I closed the door and faced them. "You can't do that," I said, voice trembling. "You can't show up uninvited and embarrass me at a work event." Lorraine blinked, offended. "We're family, Evelyn. Family doesn't need invitations." Adrian smirked. "And it's not like you don't have the space." That night, I drew the line. I started skipping Sunday dinners. I stopped answering every call. I stopped sharing updates about my life. The more I pulled away, the more they pressed in. The more I built peace, the more they rattled the door. But I knew something was coming. Adrian's 35th birthday was around the corner, and that would be the moment everything finally exploded. Part 3. 3 weeks before Adrian's 35th birthday, he lost his job. Again. This time, it had been a position at his friend's father's insurance firm. A job practically handed to him, with low expectations and high leniency. 2 months in, he was let go. The official reasons? Inconsistent attendance and poor performance. The unofficial ones? Probably the same issues that had followed him from job to job. A lack of discipline, an allergy to structure, and an uncanny ability to turn second chances into sob stories. But if you asked Lorraine and Edward, the story sounded very different. They were intimidated, my mother insisted during one of our phone calls. "Your brother's leadership qualities are rare. People fear that kind of natural talent." Natural talent. I had to mute the phone for a second just to take a breath. The day after Adrian was fired, my mother called with that familiar softness in her voice, the tone that sounded like compassion, but always carried a silent burden, the expectation I'd long since learned to hear before she even spoke. "Evelyn, sweetheart," she began gently, "your brother is just going through a rough patch again." I stared at my screen, already anticipating what would follow. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied flatly, mentally bracing myself. "Well, his car payment is coming up, and with his birthday just around the corner, I was hoping maybe you could help him out a little, just until something else comes through. You know how hard the market is these days." It was a speech I could have recited in my sleep. I had heard it so many times. The words had become a lullaby of emotional obligation. Against my better judgment, I transferred $300 to Adrian. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a gesture, a buffer, a peace offering. 3 days later, Edward called. "Hey, Evie, look, your brother's rent is due. And these landlords, they've got no patience for temporary setbacks. It's just a tight moment for him. Think you could spot him this once?" This once. Another lie I wanted to believe. Another $200 gone from my account and into the bottomless pit that was Adrian's life. I told myself that was it, that I'd drawn the line. But the requests kept trickling in like a slow leak in a roof. Grocery money, a new suit for job interviews, help with utilities. Each one labeled as essential, each one framed as temporary, and each one tagged with the same guilt-drenched mantra, family supports each other. By the time Adrian's birthday loomed, I had loaned nearly $3,000, a sum we all knew would never be returned. One afternoon, while picking at a salad during a break at work, I confided in Emma, one of the few colleagues who knew just how deep the family guilt ran. "It feels like I'm being punished for being responsible," I told her. "The more I accomplish, the more I'm expected to carry Adrian's failures on my back." She leaned forward, frowning. "You need to set boundaries, Evelyn. Clear, firm ones. Or this pattern will eat you alive." "But they're family," I replied, almost out of reflex. It was the line I'd been trained to repeat since childhood, the moral leash that always yanked me back into line. "Family supports your growth," she said calmly. "They don't drain it. What they're doing isn't love, it's exploitation." I knew she was right. But conditioning is a powerful thing. Love, to me, had always come tied to sacrifice, measured not by joy, but by how much pain you could endure without complaint. Still, I told myself I'd start pulling back. After the birthday, no reason to ignite a family war during a celebration. I'd go, I'd smile, I'd give Adrian a thoughtful gift, then I'd step away. The weekend before the party, I went shopping. I selected an elegant, expensive watch, something well beyond what I should have spent, especially considering the recent loans. But some naive part of me hoped the gesture might close the widening distance between us, a peace offering he couldn't dismiss. That evening, my phone buzzed with message after message from family, from Lorraine. "Don't forget Adrian's favorite chocolate cake, and wear something nice. Aunt Judith is driving in from Portland." From Edward, "Make sure you're on time for once. This is important to your mother." From my cousin Stephanie, "Can't wait to see you at the party. We need to catch up." From Uncle Thomas, "Good to see the family together again. We've missed you." It was all carefully coded language, a subtle pressure, a reminder that absence wouldn't go unnoticed, that the family system was alive and watching, that I, the wayward daughter, was expected to re-enter orbit. The morning of the party, I woke with anxiety pressing on my chest. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a simple navy blue dress, conservative, modest, impossible to criticize. I straightened my hair, kept my makeup minimal, and left my jewelry in the drawer. I calculated every detail, not to impress, but to avoid judgment. As I wrapped Adrian's gift in silver paper, I rehearsed neutral responses to the usual questions. My job, my apartment, my relationship status. I was preparing for battle with smiles and silence. The drive to my parents' suburban home took 40 minutes. With every mile, I felt my confidence slip away, replaced by that old ache of inadequacy, that feeling of walking into a room already sentenced. I parked between my uncle's SUV and my cousin's compact sedan, took a breath, then stepped inside. The house was full. Balloons floated near the ceiling, and a large "Happy 35th Birthday, Adrian" banner stretched across the dining room. I was greeted by familiar faces, distant smiles, and polite tension. Lorraine met me at the door. "Finally, you're here," she said, though I was exactly on time. "Put your gift on the table. Adrian's in the backyard with your father and Uncle Thomas." As I moved through the house, exchanging hellos with relatives I hadn't seen in months, I could feel it, the shift. They didn't know what to do with me anymore. I had become the outsider, the one who broke the unspoken rule, never outshine Adrian. Aunt Judith caught my arm as I passed. "That penthouse still treating you well?" she asked, her tone implying I'd traded loyalty for luxury. "It's perfect for me," I said softly and moved on. In the kitchen, I overheard Patricia, my mother's lifelong friend, whisper, "She thinks she's better than the rest of us now. Fancy job, fancy apartment." Meanwhile, Poor Adrian can't catch a break. I said nothing, focused on the vegetable tray I had brought. Familiar pattern. My success was prideful. Adrian's failure was bad luck. Outside, Adrian stood with a beer in hand, holding court, spinning stories about toxic workplaces and how his big ideas intimidated managers. My father nodded along. My uncle laughed. My cousins listened, captivated. He nodded at me when I arrived, a brief dismissive gesture, before continuing his tale of misunderstood brilliance. I sat at a table near the edge of the yard and watched the scene unfold like an old play I'd seen 1,000 times. In Adrian's version of our lives, the version Lorraine and Edward nurtured, he was a misunderstood genius, a visionary trapped in a world too dull to appreciate him. In the real version, backed by years of evidence, he was a grown man who refused to grow up, who weaponized charm and pity, and was endlessly bailed out by parents who couldn't bear to watch him struggle. Little did I know, those two versions of reality were about to collide, and what happened next would crack the illusion we'd all been clinging to forever. Final part. The party was still buzzing in the backyard, laughter mingling with the clink of beer bottles, but I felt like a ghost in my own family's home. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-eaten cake I had brought, Adrian's favorite, per Lorraine's orders. Not one person had thanked me, not Adrian, not my parents, not a single soul. The expensive watch I had carefully wrapped now sat unceremoniously among opened gift bags and cards. Its box was half closed, discarded like an afterthought. My mother had spent more time praising Aunt Judith's banana pudding than acknowledging what I'd spent my dwindling savings to give. That was the moment I knew. I didn't belong here. Not in this house, not in this family, not in this narrative that painted me as the villain for simply thriving. So I walked out, quietly. No scene, no goodbye. As I drove home, the silence in the car was deafening, but it wasn't sadness, it was clarity. For the first time, I wasn't asking why they treated me this way. I was asking how I would finally free myself from them forever. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked late at Horizon. Not out of necessity. I'd recently been asked to join the strategic leadership team, but because it gave me space to think clearly. I printed bank statements, compiled a spreadsheet. Every dollar I'd ever sent Adrian, itemized, time-stamped, annotated. I gathered screenshots of text messages, voicemails from my parents begging for just one more time, and even social media posts where Adrian flaunted nights out and luxury purchases he claimed to have earned. Then I emailed a journalist, Clara Byrne, whose podcast on family estrangement and emotional exploitation I'd listened to religiously. She responded within 24 hours. We met in a quiet cafe downtown, where I shared my story. Names were changed, of course, identities protected, but the truth was intact. A few weeks later, her feature went live under the title, The Invisible Daughter, How One Woman Funded Her Brother's Life and Lost Herself Along the Way. It exploded, not just among listeners, but in tech circles, women's leadership forums, and financial abuse advocacy groups. My inbox flooded with messages from women saying, "This is my story too." I felt seen, but more importantly, I was no longer alone, but I wasn't finished. I sold the penthouse. It wasn't an emotional decision. It was a strategic one. I had bought it when I believed having something to show, something grand, would finally earn my parents' approval. But now I knew. No level of success would ever be enough, not if it threatened the golden illusion they had built around Adrian. So I sold it, bought a smaller, sun-filled home outside the city, a space that felt mine in every way, not because it proved anything, but because it needed to prove nothing. With the leftover profit, I did something bold. I anonymously donated $50,000 to a nonprofit that helped women in tech from marginalized backgrounds, and named the scholarship after Adrian Hart, billing it as a gesture inspired by his sister's resilience. The nonprofit posted the announcement. Local news picked it up. LinkedIn flooded with congratulations. What a generous man, people wrote. A great brother. Such support for women in STEM. Adrian called me the next day. "Did you, do something?" he asked, confused, breathless. I smiled. "What do you mean?" "There's this thing going around online. Some scholarship with my name on it. People are tagging me. Journalists are emailing me. What the hell is going on?" "Sounds like you're becoming quite the role model," I said. "Congrats." Then I hung up. Adrian couldn't help himself. He agreed to an interview with a podcast that had picked up the story, claimed the scholarship was his idea, that he wanted to honor his brilliant sister and pay it forward. He rambled about the importance of women in tech and his passion for mentorship, forgetting, of course, that you need credibility to lie convincingly. Clara Byrne heard the interview. She did what journalists do best. She investigated. Within days, she published a follow-up piece titled, "Brother or Brand? The Truth Behind the Viral Scholarship That Wasn't His." The article revealed everything, that the money came from a donation I made, that Adrian had no involvement, and that his only real connection was years of being financially supported by his sister. The internet turned on him. Job offers vanished. Former friends mocked him. The company he was courting for a marketing position ghosted him completely. And I said nothing. I didn't gloat. I didn't correct or defend. I just let the truth speak, louder than I ever could. Lorraine and Edward were livid, but not at Adrian, at me. "You humiliated your brother," Lorraine hissed in a voicemail. "Do you have any idea what this has done to him?" Edward called too. "This isn't how family handles things, Evelyn. You've crossed a line." But their fury was short-lived, because the next blow hit them. 6 months earlier, they had co-signed a personal loan for Adrian, something I hadn't even known. He had convinced them it was for a new startup, some vague online venture. In reality, he had invested it in a cryptocurrency opportunity pitched by a shady friend from college. The coin collapsed. The platform shut down overnight. And just like that, $120,000, including nearly half of Lorraine and Edward's retirement savings, was gone. They were devastated. Adrian refused to take responsibility, blaming everyone but himself. Lorraine's sobs on the phone turned from rage to desperation. "Please," she begged. "We don't know what to do. Evelyn, we need your help." I agreed to meet them. Once. Neutral territory. We sat at a small table in the corner of a quiet cafe. Lorraine looked aged. Makeup couldn't hide the brokenness in her expression. Edward stared at the table, his pride crumbling with every second. Adrian didn't speak at all. "I know we made mistakes," Lorraine said finally, her voice trembling, "but we're still your family." I stirred my tea. "I know we weren't fair," Edward added, "but you've always been the strong one. We thought you could handle it." My eyes met theirs, not with hate, but with something far colder. Resolve. "You didn't raise a daughter," I said. "You raised a buffer, a cushion for his failures. And now you're shocked I stopped letting you fall on me." "We're sorry," Lorraine whispered. "Please, forgive us." I nodded slowly. "I believe you are sorry," I said, "but I don't forgive you. I've just released you." Their faces fell in unison. "What does that mean?" Adrian finally asked, voice sharp. "It means you're free to live with the consequences of your choices," I replied, just like I had to. I stood, placed cash on the table, and left, the bell above the cafe door ringing softly behind me. 1 year later, I stood on a stage at a Women in Tech summit, the auditorium filled with bright-eyed young developers, many of them scholarship recipients from the fund I had created. Rebecca sat in the front row, beaming. I finished my talk with a line that came from the deepest part of me. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop bleeding for people who never learned how to heal themselves. Applause roared. I smiled, not because they clapped, but because I finally understood. The most satisfying revenge wasn't ruining them. It was reclaiming me. Please comment if this story moved you in any way.